By late afternoon, the sacred band of Thebes was breaking. This elite unit had faced the strongest armies in Greece and survived. Now most of its men were being killed where they stood. Nearby, the Athenian line was collapsing. The cities that had once stopped Persia, humbled Sparta, and dominated the Aegean were losing to a kingdom many Greeks had long dismissed as half-barbarian. The battle was Chaeronea in 338 BC. By sunset, Athens and Thebes would still exist. Their temples, assemblies, and rivalries would remain, but their freedom to decide the future of Greece was effectively gone. The victor was Philip II of Macedon, and among his commanders was his 18-year-old son, Alexander. Macedonia had not defeated a strong and united Greece. It had entered a world exhausted by almost 2 centuries of competition. To understand how the Greeks reached this point, we have to return to the battle that first proved the largest empire on earth could bleed. In 490 BC, the Persian king Darius sent an expedition across the Aegean. Athens and Eretria had supported a revolt by Greek cities under Persian rule, and Darius intended to punish them. Eretria fell first. Athens was next. The Persian army landed at Marathon, a broad plain roughly 40 kilometers from the city. Sparta promised help, but its army was delayed by a religious observance. Athens had to fight with the small city of Plataea beside it. The Athenians were hoplites, heavily armed citizen soldiers, trained to fight shoulder to shoulder. The Persians had more archers, more cavalry, and experience fighting across an empire. Waiting only gave them more options, so the Greeks attacked. Tradition credits the Athenian commander Miltiades with strengthening his wings while leaving the center thinner. When the lines collided, the Greek center was pushed back, but the wings drove their opponents away, turned inward, and struck the Persian center from both sides. The Persians retreated to their ships. Then the exhausted Athenians marched back towards their city before the fleet could sail around and attack it undefended. Marathon did not destroy Persian power. It did something more dangerous. It convinced the Greeks that Persia could be beaten. Before the next invasion arrives, my name is Noah. We built this channel for people who want the full story behind history's most famous moments. If that sounds like you, subscribe. It's free and it helps us make better videos. All right, 10 years later, Persia returned. In 480 BC, Darius's son Xerxes crossed into Greece with an army and fleet far larger than the force sent to Marathon. Ancient writers gave impossible numbers, but the reality was frightening enough. No Greek city could face this invasion alone. A coalition formed, led on land by Sparta and at sea largely shaped by Athens. Their first serious defense used 2 narrow spaces at once. At Thermopylae, King Leonidas blocked the coastal road with 300 Spartans and several thousand allies. At Artemisium, the Greek fleet guarded the nearby strait, preventing the Persians from simply sailing around the land force. The narrow pass at Thermopylae reduced Persia's advantage in numbers. For 2 days, repeated attacks failed to break the Greek line, but a local man named Ephialtes revealed a mountain path around the position. Leonidas dismissed most of the army. The Spartans remained, along with the Thespians, who chose to stay, and a Theban contingent whose exact role is still debated. They were surrounded and destroyed. The famous Last Stand did not defeat Xerxes. It bought time, protected the withdrawal of the fleet, and became a symbol of resistance. But the combined defensive line was gone. The ships at Artemisium withdrew, central Greece lay open, and the Persian army marched towards Athens. Then the Athenians made a decision that looked less like strategy than surrender. They abandoned their own city. Years earlier, the politician Themistocles had persuaded Athens to invest the wealth of its silver mines in a fleet of fast warships called triremes. Now those ships became the real walls of Athens. Most civilians were evacuated, while the Persian army entered the empty city and burned it. Many Greek commanders wanted to withdraw south and defend the Peloponnese. Themistocles understood that if the alliance scattered, Xerxes could defeat its fleets separately. So, according to later accounts, he sent the Persians a false message. The Greeks were divided, he claimed, and preparing to escape. If Xerxes attacked immediately, he could trap them. The Persian fleet entered the narrow waters beside Salamis. That was the trap. In open sea, Persian numbers could surround the Greeks. Inside the strait, those numbers created congestion. Ships struggled to maneuver. Oars collided. Formations broke apart. The Greek triremes attacked from a more organized line, ramming vessels that had little room to escape. Xerxes watched from the shore as his fleet was driven back. Thermopylae produced the legend. Salamis changed the war. Without control of the sea, Xerxes could not safely supply his entire army. He withdrew with much of his force, leaving his general Mardonius to finish the conquest. The following year, Mardonius occupied Athens again, but this time, the Greek coalition assembled a major land army at Plataea. The battle began badly. Greek units were repositioning and losing contact with one another when the Persians attacked. But once the heavily armored hoplites closed the distance, Persian arrows could not stop them. Mardonius was killed, his army collapsed, and its fortified camp was taken. At almost the same time, the Greek fleet attacked a Persian position at Mycale on the coast of Asia Minor. The victory encouraged Greek cities under Persian control to revolt. The invasion was over, but victory created two new powers. Athens turned its naval alliance into an empire. Sparta remained the strongest land power and leader of its own coalition. The enemy outside Greece had been defeated. Now the alliances built to save Greece became the weapons Greeks would use against one another. The Peloponnesian War began in 431 BC. Athens relied on ships, money, and fortified walls. Sparta relied on the most feared land army in Greece. Then at Pylos, the balance suddenly changed. An Athenian force fortified a position on the Spartan coast. In the fighting that followed, hundreds of Spartan troops were trapped on the nearby island of Sphacteria, including members of Sparta's elite citizen class. Athens sent archers, javelin throwers, and light infantry onto the island. Instead of meeting the Spartans in a traditional hoplite battle, they attacked from a distance, withdrew, and attacked again. Exhausted and surrounded, the surviving Spartans surrendered. The shock spread across Greece. Spartans were supposed to return with their shields or be carried home on them. At Sphacteria, they gave up. For Athens, this looked like the moment the war had turned permanently in its favor. It was actually the beginning of its most dangerous mistake. Athens now believed it had Sparta by the throat. An early peace attempt failed, and confidence turned into ambition. That ambition pointed west toward Sicily. In 415 BC, Athens launched one of the largest expeditions any Greek city had ever assembled. Its official purpose was to help allies in Sicily. Its real opportunity was Syracuse, the island's richest and most powerful city. The plan was controversial from the beginning. The experienced General Nicias argued against it, then found himself placed in command. The brilliant and dangerous Alcibiades supported the expedition, but was recalled to Athens over a religious scandal. Syracuse organized its defense. The Athenians tried to surround the city with walls, but a Spartan commander named Gylippus arrived and helped the defenders build a counterwall that blocked them. Athens sent reinforcements. A desperate night assault failed in darkness and confusion. Nicias hesitated to retreat, and after a lunar eclipse, religious advisors convinced him to delay again. By then, Syracuse had closed the harbor. At Salamis, narrow water had saved Athens. At Syracuse, narrow water destroyed it. The final naval battle became a crush of ships, broken oars, and boarding parties. Athenian crews could not use the speed and maneuvering that had built their empire. The fleet was defeated. The army tried to escape overland. It was surrounded, broken into separate columns, and forced to surrender. Nicias and his fellow commander Demosthenes were executed. Thousands of prisoners were confined in stone quarries, where many died from exposure, hunger, and disease. Athens had not merely lost a battle. It had lost ships, trained crews, soldiers, money, commanders, and the belief that its empire was untouchable. Its allies began to revolt. Sparta renewed the war, and Persia, once the enemy of every Greek coalition, now financed a Spartan fleet. The commander who used that money most effectively was Lysander. In 405 BC, the final Athenian fleet camped at Aegospotmi, near the Hellespont. The location was vital because Athens depended on grain shipped through this narrow route. Each day, the Athenians rowed out and challenged Lysander. Each day, he refused battle. When they returned to shore, crews scattered to search for food. Lysander waited until the routine made them careless. Then he attacked. Almost the entire Athenian fleet was captured on the beach. Only a handful of ships escaped. With the grain route cut and no navy left to protect it, Athens was starved into surrender. Its walls were torn down. Its empire disappeared. Sparta had won the war, But Sparta had not solved the problem of Greece. It had simply become the next city powerful enough to frighten everyone else. Spartan dominance produced new coalitions, new wars, and a new challenger. Thebes. In 371 BC, a Spartan army met the Thebans at Leuctra. Greek armies normally placed their best troops on the right and tried to maintain a relatively even line. The Theban commander Epaminondas did something different. He concentrated extraordinary depth on his left, placing his strongest troops, including the sacred band, directly opposite the Spartan elite. Other parts of his line were held back, rather than committed equally. The attack struck Sparta where it expected to be strongest. The Spartan king Cleombrotus was killed. The line broke. The army whose reputation had dominated Greece for generations was defeated in a direct land battle. Leuctra destroyed more than soldiers. It destroyed the idea that Spartan supremacy was natural. Epaminondas invaded the Peloponnese and helped free Messenia, depriving Sparta of much of the labor and wealth that had supported its military system. For a brief moment, Thebes became the leading power in Greece. Then at Mantinea in 362 BC, Epaminondas won another hard-fought battle and was mortally wounded at the moment of victory. Without him, Thebes could not turn success into a stable order. Sparta was weakened. Athens was diminished. Thebes had peaked. The battle ended with no city strong enough to lead Greece, but every city strong enough to prevent another from doing so. That vacuum belonged to Macedon. Philip II had rebuilt the Macedonian kingdom around a permanent, disciplined army. His infantry carried the sarissa, a pike far longer than the traditional hoplite spear. The phalanx could pin an enemy in place while cavalry and lighter troops attacked where the line was vulnerable. But Philip's greatest weapon was not one formation, it was combination. He used diplomacy, marriage, bribery, sieges, and battlefield reform as parts of the same strategy. By 338 BC, his expansion finally pushed Athens and Thebes into alliance. At Chaeronea, Philip commanded the Macedonian right against the Athenians. His young son Alexander fought on the left, opposite the Thebans. The exact sequence is debated. Later tradition describes Philip drawing the Athenians forward through a controlled withdrawal. Whether it was a planned feint or a response to pressure, the result was the same. The Athenian line lost cohesion. The Macedonians exploited the gap. On the other wing, the Theban line was broken and the sacred band was overwhelmed. The coalition collapsed. Philip did not erase the Greek cities or abolish their governments. Instead, he formed the League of Corinth. Its members kept their local institutions, but the freedom to make war, form alliances, and shape the wider Greek world now belonged to Macedon. These battles do not tell a simple story of rise and fall. Each one changed what power in Greece meant. Marathon made the citizen hoplite a symbol of resistance. Salamis made Athenian naval empire possible. Sphacteria showed that Spartan discipline could break. Syracuse showed that a democracy could be ruined by its own ambition. Leuctra proved that tactical innovation could overturn generations of prestige. Chaeronea showed that no single city could match a kingdom able to combine manpower, money, diplomacy, and permanent military reform. Ancient Greece was never one nation waiting to be united. It was a world of fiercely independent communities. That competition produced extraordinary politics, art, philosophy, and military innovation. It also made lasting unity almost impossible. The Greeks then spent generations proving how difficult it was to remain together. In the end, Macedonia did not conquer a civilization that had suddenly become weak. It conquered a system in which almost every victory had created the next war. The battles that shaped ancient Greece were not only contests over land, they were the steps by which the city-states learned how to defeat empires, defeat one another, and finally lose control of the world they had created.